mid-1st century AD. Julius Caesar was the mid-1st century BC, so 100 years after Julius Caesar. So this is the Roman army from the height, the golden era of the Roman Empire. The army that marched under Nero, Vespasian, some of the great, most terrible emperors. They brought their word to the known world. So, during the display, you'll get a chance. We'll talk you through the armour, the equipment, the battle formations, and the siege tactics of the Roman army. We'll give you a glimpse of what made it such a formidable and terrible fighting force.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the Romans invaded Britain in the year 43 AD. Very quickly they came up through Britain, and they built first of all a fortress at Lincoln, and then later they built a fortress here at York, which is underneath the minster up there. They sent 4 legions across the channel, and the legion consisted of 5,300 men. This was broken down into cohorts and then down into centuries. Just to confuse you, a century in a Roman army is 80 men and not 100. The private soldier of the legion is called a legionary. He signed on for a period of 25 years, and during that 25 years was not allowed to make a legal marriage. If he was married when he enlisted, the actual process of enlistment was an automatic form of divorce. So we will take male recruits immediately after. He looks like he wants to join up. The ancient writer Eboracum tells us that when you're looking for a soldier for the legions, you have to have good hearing, good eyesight, good set of teeth, and a full set of genitals. He actually writes that. So let's have a look at the equipment of the Roman soldier, the Roman legionary. So starting at the top, you've got these Imperial Gallic helmets, big cheek pieces either side of the face, big neck guard at the back of the helmet, and a reinforcement here on the front to take sword blows. You can see their armour is made of strips of metal. It's called lorca segmentata, made of segments of metal, and this is riveted inside to leather straps, and this makes the armour quite flexible. And the weight of theirs is about 10 kilos. Around the bottom, some of the soldiers aren't wearing that type of armour. Some are wearing mail, which is made of small round links of metal. Around the waist is a military belt, and at the front of the belt is an apron, supposedly for the protection of lower stomach and private parts, although we find this more psychological than practical. In fact, when you're running, it can be a damn nuisance. Equipped with a large shield called a scutum, and the scutum is made of laminated wood, and we use that every day. But we call it plywood. Laminated wood, if you look at a piece of plywood on the end, you can see it's thin layers of wood with the grain going in different directions, and this makes a very strong construction. And that's how the shields are made. The design on the shield probably represents the legion the men have come from. They've got 3 weapons. First of all, they have a javelin. This is a throwing weapon. So you can imagine volleys of these being thrown to break up the enemy's own formation, and then the soldiers would come forward with the famous gladius, the short stabbing and thrusting sword. And I say stabbing and thrusting, you don't slash and cut with it, you stab with it. It's far more lethal to have a 4-inch wound in the stomach than it would be a cut on your shoulders, for instance. And finally, if the enemy were really pressed together, on the left side they carry a short pugil or dagger. Now, as we said, the legions are organised into centuries of 18 men. On the march, the soldiers are expected to carry 3 days' supply of food. They march with their shields covered. You can see they've got their helmets strung to their chest. Their shields are covered in leather colours, and Julius Caesar in the battle said the enemy came upon us so quickly we didn't have to take time to take the covers off the shields. They're carrying three days' supply of food, pots and pans. They've got a cloak. Stop. They've got a cloak. They've got a satchel. They've got pots and pans, as you can see, you might need on the camp. And they've got bread here. They'll have a change of underwear, maybe, although the underwear was more like a loincloth than an actual pair of pants. We have various officers attached to the legionaries. First of all, this chap's called a signifer, which from the Latin we get the word sign. So the standard he carries is a sign to the legionaries, their own standard to follow. And you'll see that standard bearers wear animal skins over their helmets. In this case, it's a wolf skin, which you can see hanging down the back. Another duty of the signifer was to look after the savings of the men within his century. He's followed by the corner ken, who carries this large circular horn used to give commands in battle and on the march. This chap carries a flag, and if you look at the flag, you've got LEG for Legion and double X for the 20th Legion. And this is one of the legions that came to Britain in 43 AD and wasn't withdrawn from Britain until 410 AD. Obviously it wasn't the same men. So the Roman occupation, the official occupation of Britain for the army was almost 400 years. And then we went into the Saxon period after that. The second in command in the century was called the Optio, because it was a centurion's option to choose him. His badges of rank, particularly are the staff that he carries, and a ring on his right hand. We've given him a large crest and feathers, as you can see, and he's also got a little satchel attached to his belt with the orders of the day. And he's wearing scale armour. It's a third type of armour that the Romans used, made of little bronze scales. I'm in the equipment of a Roman centurion, and the centurions were the only rank where the crest went across the helmet from side to side, a transverse crest. I've got greaves on my legs to show my rank, a cloak on my left shoulder, I've got medals on my chest, and I always carry a vine stick, which is part of my badge of office, but also used on the men for casual corporal punishment. In fact, there was a centurion on the Rhine who was, in Latin, was called Cado Alteram, which was, in Latin means, fetch me another, because he was always breaking his sticks on the backs of the soldiers. They had a mutiny, he was the first one to be killed. These chaps with the oval shields are Roman auxiliary soldiers. Now the word auxiliary in Latin means helper. They help the legions. If you went to Hadrian's Wall, for instance, which was 73 miles long, if you went to Hadrian's Wall, you would find auxiliary soldiers, you wouldn't find legionaries. Although it was the legionaries who actually built the wall. And they built Hadrian's Wall, some 73 miles long, with 13, 14 forts on it, and they did that in 5 or 6 years. It would take us 25 years to get the planning permission. The auxiliary equipment is, if you like, more simple. They got simple brass helmets. They got mail shirts. You never see them in the segmented armour. They got double belts support their swords and daggers. And they got a flat oval shield more suitable for skirmishing and a stabbing spear. They wouldn't throw the spear, they would stab you with it and retain the weapon to stop the next enemy that they came to. They obviously carry as well a gladius, and they carry a dagger. They were organised into smaller groups, a cohort of either 480 men or 800 men. They weren't organised into legions. Now with the man in front of you, we'll show you some formation before we shoot the artillery weapons.
Right, that's enough education. Let's get down to some good, honest bloodshed. So the Roman army, it's 43 AD, and it is determined to complete the conquest of Britain. Britain was known to the Romans. Julius Caesar launched some major raids, but it was still a dark and mysterious island to most of the men. The idea of invading actually caused a rebellion amongst the troops, but here they are. Now, Britain was populated by numerous Celtic tribes, sometimes warring, sometimes allied. Quite sophisticated culture, but they hadn't seen anything like the Romans, and they did not have an army to match. And here is a flavour of what it was like to fight the Roman army. The professional, well-armoured, fit, and well-drilled Romans. Imagine trying to fight this. Look at the huge shields, steel helmets, the razor-sharp swords. How would you fight that? All the while, the march being kept syndex, keeping the men in step, keeping the men in line. And look at the auxilia, making sure there's no surprise attacks as the soldiers withdraw. As we said, this is a professional army, which is quite unusual in the ancient world. The Celtic armies were what we call levy armies, raised as and when necessary, untrained, inexperienced, and under-equipped. A lot of the Celts were fantastic metal workers, but they simply didn't have the economy or the organisation to equip their soldiers like this. A Celtic chieftain could be fantastically equipped with helmets and armour, but each of these Roman soldiers is equipped as well as a Celtic chieftain. Now imagine you've been chased off the battlefield once and you were sheltering inside a hill fort behind banks of earth and ramparts of wood. Would you be safe? Alas, no, because the Romans have this formation, the testudo, the tortoise. It looks like a tiled roof, and that's exactly how it behaves. Missiles thrown from above will just bounce off. Arrows, rocks, it's pretty much invulnerable to those. Again, look at the auxiliary guarding those flanks. The men chanting, Sindex, Sindex. Keeping in step. The discipline, the organisation paying off again. But a shield has been dropped, exposing a vulnerable corner. I doubt the Centurion will be happy about that. Somebody's going to get a whack in. I wonder what that is in Latin. Discipline was a big thing in the Roman army.
They had a brain, they don't pass the brain around.
The punishments for infractions were varied. You could be forced to wear your tunic too long. Having it below the knee was effeminate. Be given low-grade rations. But also, if you fell asleep on duty or ran from the enemy, you could be beaten to death by your own comrades. A great motivator, we find. So, you've seen the shield wall. You've seen the testudo. Perhaps the Celts could overwhelm the invading Romans. A confederation of tribes, beat them by sheer weight of numbers. You can't match their tactics, you can't match their armour. Perhaps you can simply swamp the Romans. Well, they had a formation to deal with that too, the cunium, an arrowhead. This is still used by riot police today for a very similar situation. A small, disciplined group of men aiming to break up a disorganised mob in front of them. And remember, as the Celts weren't so disciplined, panic could spread far faster. If the man next to you ran, you would run too. Imagine facing this, the psychological impact, the glinting armour, the men obeying their orders. Imagine missiles raining down, arrows, bolts. You don't have armour, you don't have training. And you are facing the fighting force which dominates the known world. The drumming of the swords on the shields to intimidate you. And the next order is the charge. Would you stand or would you run, do you think? Give them a round of applause.
Come here, open.
Centurions apologising to someone. The way the Romans fought was in solid blocks. When you see it in the movies, when it comes into hand-to-hand fighting, that wouldn't have really happened. The Romans would fight in these blocks, almost like a rugby scrum. And that's where these short stabbing swords played such an important part. There wasn't space to wave a sword around in a fencing match. You'd stab and move on. It was a mechanical way of fighting. Now, the Romans were skilled at open warfare in the field, but they're also skilled at sieges. And here are some artillery pieces. Now, one of the big things the Romans did not have was gunpowder. So how do you have artillery without gunpowder? Where's the power? Well, the answer is it comes from sinew and rope. If you look at these machines closely, each one has a twist of rope, a bundle of rope that's wound. And into that twist is a wooden arm, or two wooden arms. You pull back the wooden arm against that twist of rope, and it builds an enormous amount of stored tension. Then a trigger mechanism lets that string go, and it snaps. And that's where the power comes from. Now we have three artillery pieces here. Closest to the crowd, with the horizontal arms, is the ballista. In the middle, with the vertical arm, is the onager. And then there is the catapulta, which has been loaded. First shot, direct hit. Look, give that a round of applause. Gives you some idea of the power of that. So steel-headed, an iron-headed bolt knocked that target straight down. Now, because of the restricted area we're using, we're shooting, the ballista is going to shoot an onion. A little high. But you saw the speed of that thwack of the machine and the thump of the onion landing. Gives you an idea of the power of these. But we scaled them right down. This is a very restricted area. These machines are much more powerful, can go much, much further. Another hit by the catapulta. A first shot from the Onager. Again, this is such a restricted environment, such a restricted area. That machine can go four, 5 times as far. These have been, it's quite difficult to use them on such a low power, so we're doing our best. On the far side are some archers. Every Roman soldier was taught to use a bow, but most of the archers seem to have been from auxilia units. In Latin, they're the Segatari, the Sagittarius. You can see the machines being wound up. You can sometimes see the clanking as though they're too powerful to be pulled back by our hands, so we use a ratchet system. You can see the Onager being wound back. That takes 2 men with iron bars pulling that vertical arm back against the twist of rope at the bottom of the arm, building the stress, building the tension. The catapult has been loaded, the ballista has been loaded. Another shot from the catapulta, another hit. 3 for 3 hit them. The archers, the volley with the archers. Scale this up in your imagination. Imagine an army using these thousands of archers. There would probably be 80 catapulta to a legion. Imagine the barrage that would have put down. Oh, death by onion. Give them a round of applause. Again, imagine yourselves as the Celtic army. You're not trained. You probably don't even have armour. A shield if you're lucky. Imagine the damage this would do. Not only physically, but also psychologically. Another shot from the Onager. Now the catapulta and the archers could have been used in open battles. The ballista and the Onager are purely siege weapons. And whilst these machines are the correct size, they could be built far larger. For some of the big sieges in the Middle East, some of these machines could have been 10 metres high, possibly 7 or 8 metres high, far larger. And obviously with larger weapons, it becomes heavier shot. They would have shot large stones, and you wouldn't have been trying to knock down walls with these machines. You'd have been trying to get the missiles over the walls to damage what was inside, or maybe deter the defenders from even standing on the walls. Another volley from the archers. We do know a lot about Roman sieges, partly from the archaeology, but also from Roman authors. Another shot from the ballista. They missed, but see how fast that was moving. One Roman author tells us of an Onager disintegrating as it was being wound back. Such was the stress it was under, it killed the crew. But we also know of these missiles, these stones being launched, hitting defenders. Centurion would like to have a word about the archer.
Just to explain the bows that these men are using is what we call a composite recurve bow. Unlike a long bow, which is made of one piece of material, a length of ash, the recurve bow is made of 4 different materials. It's made of bone, sinew, wood, and horn. You can see when the bow is strung, the bowstring keeps it to the shape that it's in. But if you take the bowstring off, then the bow bends back the other way. This is why it's called a recurve bow. So you bend it back the other way. So in order to bend it, you will step inside it. And string it that way. And there's also a record that the soldiers kept in inclement weather. They kept the bowstrings in their helmets. to keep the bowstrings dry. So that's a recurve bow. That was very interesting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people know that.
I'm going to need to charge the phone.
Last final shot from the Onager.
You missed again.
I think the tree has surrendered.
These weapons can fire a lot further, shoot a lot further, I should say. There's no gunpowder, so you can't fire them. They shoot a lot further than this. They would shoot at least to those buildings over there. But obviously, we can't shoot out of the museum grounds, and also damage the vans we hired to bring the kit in.
That, ladies and gentlemen, was Roman artillery. Give them a round of applause. Centurion is now gathering the men back. They're picking up their peeler. Sorry we couldn't throw them at you today, but last time we did that it was very messy and the insurance premiums went up.
Waking up. He's charging.
Isn't it nice, ladies and gentlemen? Look at the sun shining on his armour.
Yeah.
You're lucky today that the sun's out.
One thing to bear in mind with the Romans was it wasn't just about fighting. The Romans had a huge social impact. As the Centurio said, they were in Britain for almost 400 years and changed the face of the country forever. Where the Romans went, they built towns, civilian settlements grew up, amphitheatres were built, bathhouses. They brought writing, coinage, central authority, all things unknown in Britain before that point. We will now salute the standards. So, the standards were of great psychological value to the soldiers, and to lose them in battle was a huge disgrace. But to salute them was to swear loyalty to the emperor, a very important part of a soldier's duty. The army were the power brokers in the empire, and securing their loyalty was always a priority for the emperor. And if you couldn't be there in person, they would swear their loyalty to the standards as a representation of the emperor. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Do come and visit us in our camp over there. We're only too willing to talk to you. And ladies in particular, grab yourself a Roman soldier and examine his armour and equipment.